Senator, thank you for the time. We appreciate it.
Good to be with you.
The Senate now has the Republican spending bill from the House. It extends the 2017 tax cuts, which is top priority for President Trump and the Trump administration. But as you know, it knocks millions of people off Medicaid. It cuts SNAP benefits for a lot of folks too. The Congressional Budget Office estimates it's going to raise the debt by $4 trillion in this country. Where do you stand on this? Because senators on the Republican side are kind of all over the board on this.
Well, we need to get to the magic number of 51 to make the big, beautiful bill even more beautiful. And obviously we need the president to sign it. So there's daily communication, hourly communication between the three to try to figure out how do you put these pieces together. But this is hard, but it's important because part of the savings we need to accomplish is with the $37 trillion in national debt.
Right.
Is through what's called mandatory spending, as you know, and this is for every dollar the federal government spends, there's a constituency. So we need to be smart about it. We need to be surgical and and to do things that 51 senators can agree to, and the president.
Do you want changes to this bill the way it came in from the House?
Well, there's things that I'd like to see, like real work requirements for means-tested programs, something like food stamps and Medicaid you mentioned. There's no appetite for kicking poor people off of Medicaid, but right now, as a result of the Obamacare expansion, as you know, we're now paying more for able-bodied adults who can work but don't work than we are for the disabled, pregnant women and children. That's got to be fixed.
Are there any elements of the House bill right now that you oppose?
Well, I'm willing to consider all of it, and certainly the Speaker has said, please don't change too much, because he did it by one vote.
Narrow majority there.
Razor's edge.
Sure.
So we understand that, but I also know senators well enough to know that they're not just going to rubber stamp what the House does, and we're going to depend on the president to get this ultimately across the finish line.
You're pushing for this bill to include $12 billion to reimburse Texas for border security efforts over the last decade or so. Would you still support the bill if that was not included?
No. The bill has to include it, but the good news is President Trump supports it, and Speaker Johnson supports it. The House included it, and so we're having to navigate it through the Senate. But this is just fairness. This is simple justice, reimbursing Texas taxpayers for some money they never should have had to pay for Operation Lone Star because the Biden administration's open border policy. So it's really just a hypothetical question. It's not real because it will be included, and I'm confident we'll get it done.
You know, a lot of folks, especially Republicans, are concerned that the cuts to Medicaid, the proposed cuts that the House is proposing, would leave a lot of rural hospitals with fewer patients. And there's already, as you know, 20 plus rural hospitals that have closed in Texas over the last decade. How concerned are you about those constituents that are out in West Texas and South Texas that might not have access to health care?
Well, it's a real problem, but Medicaid has gotten so skewed by the Obamacare expansion. Texas wasn't one of those states. It was always a state federal share. But there's ways that we can compensate to help rural hospitals that are particularly dependent on Medicaid patients. Because as you know, typically Medicaid compensates hospitals at a much lower rate than private insurance or even Medicare. But there are ways we can compensate for that, and I know there's a lot of sensitivity to not doing anything to hurt access to health care in rural Texas.
You asked the Attorney General Pam Bondi to open an investigation into President Biden's, whether his staff misrepresented his health. Have you heard back from her?
Not yet, but it's clear that the answer to that is yes, they did. And unfortunately, the mainstream media cooperated, was complicit, as Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson, I think his name is, have now written a book about this. But the problem is people were told during the last couple of years of the Biden administration, don't believe your lying eyes. He's doing just fine. He's fully competent, and he knows, and he's in charge. And now we know that's not true, but this isn't just a political issue. It's not just something to sweep under the rugs. This is a constitutional crisis to have basically an AWOL president of the United States, somebody who's got the nuclear codes, the commander-in-chief of the military, and the idea that they can just auto-pin their way out of this and it's okay or nothing to see here is unacceptable. So we're going to get to the bottom of it, both in terms of investigating whether crimes were committed, as well as do our congressional oversight to see whether new laws need to be passed to prevent this from happening again.
Well, let me ask about both of those, because do you think, number one, crimes might have been committed by the staff? And then secondly, what type of oversight, like age limits for the presidency? What do you think?
Well, I mean, at minimum transparency, but yes, I do think federal crimes possibly were committed. Impersonating a federal officer is a crime. And
who would have done that, do you think?
Well, I don't know. We'll have to find out but certainly the Biden staff, maybe the Biden family did. They knew better than we did before the debate with President Trump that President Biden was not fully competent, and yet they ignored it and pretended like he was. And we saw the mainstream media say nothing to see here. He's doing fine. He's the same old Joe, when we know now that that was a lie.
Let me ask you about the young woman who was run over and killed on Lake Grapevine,
Yeah.
Ava Moore. The person who did it was in the country illegally. Is there any opportunity for federal charges there, do you
Yes.
think?
Yeah, another tragic circumstance, like Laken Riley, Jocelyn Nungare. Unfortunately, when you open the borders, then you open them up to criminals and people who are committing crimes and finding innocent victims like Ava Moore, somebody with incredible potential in her life that was cut way too short. But I agree that we need to look at the potential for the death penalty. What we need to do is we need to reestablish deterrence. President Trump has issued an executive order, but we'll need to change the law to make sure that federal juries can consider the death penalty when illegal immigrants take the life of an innocent American while in this country illegally. So that's something I think we both need to investigate and prosecute to the fullest extent of the law, but to the extent Congress needs to act, we need to do so.
She faces state charges now. Is there any
Right.
federal charge she could face, do you think?
Well,
Considering what happened?
There is both they're parallel jurisdiction, really. Most murder cases, for example, involuntary manslaughter cases, which perhaps this may be, we don't yet know, would be state charges, but the federal government can come in and under appropriate circumstances and pursue federal charges if indeed the state charges are inappropriate or inadequate to achieve justice. So that's something we are working on and actively looking at.
The U.S. Court of International Trade unanimously blocked President Trump's from imposing those sweeping tariffs. The three justices are on this court. I'm sure you well know. Two were appointed by Republican presidents. One was appointed by a Democrat. Did those three justices make the right call here?
Well, it's not the final word, it's the initial word, and certainly there's the Federal Court of Claims, which is sort of the intermediate appellate court, and then potentially the Supreme Court of the United States. I think we won't know the final answer until the Supreme Court weighs in, but President Trump has a variety of other legal avenues that weren't contested in this case that he could use. But the good news from my perspective, and I think what people are pleased to see, is his willingness to hit the pause button for 90 days while these tariffs are being negotiated, hopefully on a reciprocal basis, which I think is the principle that needs to be focused on. And Secretary Bessent and the U.S. Trade Representative are actively doing that with dozens, literally, of countries now. So ultimately, I think that, to me, is the goal, because we need to have access to foreign markets just as we open our markets to other countries.
Let's talk about your race for a fifth term. I've covered you for a number of years here. What more do you want to accomplish that you haven't already?
Well, I want to continue doing what I can to support President Trump's agenda, as I have since I've been in the Senate, both for his first term to his now second term. I've voted with President Trump and his agenda 99.2% of the time. My friend Ted Cruz comes in at a strong 96%. So
those numbers were surprising to me.
well, you know, in a way they shouldn't be, because when you're in the majority party, you tend to support the agenda of the president of your party. So that was true of previous Republican presidents. And I was the whip, the chief vote counter, back when one of the signature items of his first term, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, passed. And together with my friend Senator Cruz, helped confirm about 230 federal judges, including 3 on the Supreme Court. So I'm happy to support President Trump's agenda. I think He is an unconventional president, but he's willing to take on hard things that most conventional presidents are not willing to. So I'm looking forward to continuing that work.
Early polls show you trailing Ken Paxton, your challenger, by almost 10 points. Why do you think that is?
Perhaps a variety of reasons. I think it's primarily name identification. Most people don't wake up in the morning thinking about who their United States Senator is. They're worried about more important things. But this is, I think, about the first inning in a 9-inning game, and certainly we know what we need to do. I think the contrast between me and the Attorney General is pretty stark. I think character still matters to Texans, and the Attorney General is betting that character does not matter. He acts like this is yesterday's news. He's sweeping it under the rug, but I think most Texans, including most primary voters, don't know all the facts, and we intend to make sure they do.
President Trump has said so far he's going to stay out of this race. But
Yep.
have you asked him for his endorsement?
I talked to him about it yesterday, and
What did he say?
I think he's basically, he told me he's sorry he has two friends running against each other, but he's not ready to make an endorsement, and obviously that's his choice. That would be important in the race, but we're not wasting any time. We are continuing to do the work, like the reimbursement of the $11.1 billion that Texas deserves as a result of securing the border when the Biden administration would not. And so we are doing the work to get ready for March the 3rd.
Do you think he will get involved in the race later on?
I have no idea, but he, he expressed to me again regret that he had that the two of us were running against each other, but essentially with a 99.2% voting record with President Trump, somebody who has voted for every border security measure that the president has proposed, just like my colleague and the junior senator, Senator Cruz. I think people just need to know the facts, and I'm happy to leave it up to them to make the decision, and I'm confident of the outcome.
Last question, will you debate Ken Paxton?
Eagerly. Ken Paxton has done everything he could to hide from the American people, or the people of Texas, I should say, including in whistleblower litigation, which accused him of firing these brave whistleblowers who courageously put their career on the line to report what they thought was a violation of federal law. He refused to give testimony and didn't contest the case, and resulted in a $6.6 million liability for the taxpayers of Texas. So I'd be eagerly debate Ken Paxton, and particularly put the lie to any allegations he's made about my support for President Trump or his agenda or my efforts to secure the border.
Senator, thank you for the time.
Thank you.